smell. I love walking into a room or a place where the smell smells like cooking or candles or the outdoors or something like that. That just helps me to delight in my life. Go somewhere fun. Get outside. That's super important. I think for all of us, extra important for me. But getting outside helps me delight in the Lord in my life. Dance. Play sports. We're in Chicago. Museums, parks, delightful things. Oh. So what to do? Just to review. On the Sabbath, these guidelines. Stop, rest, have some time with God, do something you delight in, and that's it. Some bigger considerations that I'll say that are going to help a lot is to plan and prepare. If you don't schedule this and set it aside beforehand in your calendar and say, I'm going to do this, it won't happen. If you don't plan it with your spouse, if you're married, it won't happen. And plan out your guidelines, your boundaries. Talk about it before. What you will do, what you won't do, what boundaries you will set. Otherwise, things will creep in because our willpower is just not strong enough. We'll get taken away in the moment. If you're married, generally plan out the day, and how specifically can be different based on your personalities of who you are, but at least in chunks of time that will serve you. We're going to do this at this time, so that your expectations won't always go unmet, because if that happens, then you'll despair and you'll give up and you won't do it anymore. So the Israelites, they collected double portions the day before. Over the centuries and even today, Jews have a day of preparation before the Sabbath. They do the shopping, they wash clothes, they prepare the food, they set out the clothes. Anything you can do in order to have an uncluttered Sabbath. Take a day of preparation before, because you want to prioritize this idea of wanting to step into deeper rest. It takes a little bit more work the day before in order to do this thing the day of. What should you wrap up with your work so that you are able to lay it aside? But if you don't wrap it up, let it go. Let it go for the day. And then, we talked about this a little bit, but communicate your expectations with your spouse if you're married. If you have roommates, communicate your expectations a little bit. Very helpful. How wonderful to have a weekly mandate and rhythm of being with God, of delighting in Him and resting. Something that good is something that's something important enough to be talked about and should be prioritized and planned well so it can be done well. So, plan and prepare for the Sabbath. The next part is take baby steps. The pressure is off. That's what we've been talking about the whole time, is be you. The pressure is off. You can be authentic. It's the gospel. So that's what this is all about. So don't set in your mind this idea that you're going to hit a home run, knock it out of the park right off the bat. Baby steps. That is okay. Consistency, this goes along with that. Consistency is more important than execution, length, or depth. Just doing it again and again. In that initial passage we read in Matthew, Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. It's a process. And be okay with that process. Be okay with not being great every time and just saying, well, I'm just going to do it again. I'm going to be consistent. So those bigger considerations. Plan and prepare. Take baby steps. Consistency is key. And then some just smaller thoughts. These are coming from me, even more so than the other ones. These are just ideas, thoughts to help you. It doesn't have to be on a Sunday. It can be, but if you work on a Sunday, then it shouldn't be on a Sunday if that's your schedule. For me, Sundays are the most draining day of the week. For myself, for my family. Sunday cannot be our Sabbath. Don't fall into legalism and rule keeping with this. The true intentions versus what it became for the Pharisees, right? Jesus was doing things on the Sabbath like healing people, saving lives. And the Pharisees got bent out of shape about it. And Jesus said, what one of you, if his goat fell into a well on the Sabbath, would not rescue it? It is about It's not about these mandates of rules to follow. And then Jesus said, man was not made for the Sabbath. We are not made to serve the Sabbath. Rather, the Sabbath was made for man to help. And that's this concept of what we've been talking about. So don't fall into legalism. I think it's great to do no social media. For me, even more so than social media, is ESPN.com to check up on sports. And I'll just tell you from experience, this is helpful for me to set that rule, because I literally pull out my phone. I've realized on the Sabbath how much I do this. 50 times a day, and try to look up sports stuff. And so just to set the rule, I'm not doing that. And I will pull out my phone and then go, oh yeah, and set it aside. And that's okay. I'm learning to be present in the moment, to not be somewhere else, but to be here for one day a week. Pretty much the hardest thing for me, and yet one of the most important things regarding the Sabbath in my life that I'm working on, is being present. When I am with God, I want to be with God. When I am in conversation with another person, I want to be in that conversation with them and not thinking about what my reply is going to be or thinking about something else. When I am with my kids, I want to be with them and not thinking about the thing I need to complete before the evening. This ability to be present is like a muscle that is atrophied in me. And so, and maybe in you too, I need therapy in order to strengthen it again. And God has given me in my life, from experience, God has given me the Sabbath in order so that I can grow and strengthen and give therapy to this muscle of being present. I literally take off my watch on the Sabbath and leave it somewhere else. There's twofold reasons for this. One of them is that I think this is the thing that God helped to prompt me to know to do this, is that my watch catches my kids. I'm with them more on the Sabbath, and I pick them up more, and I've noticed from time to time my watch scratches them. And then I think, and that caused me to think, why do I care about time on the Sabbath? Basically, I'm running off the sun. The sun rises at the beginning, the sun sets at the end of the day. That's what I need for the Sabbath. I don't need other schedule things necessarily. And so I just take my watch and put it somewhere else. I don't put it on. And likewise, I leave my phone somewhere else. It doesn't mean so I know that people could call with an emergency. I know things could happen. As a minister in the church, this actually came up yesterday. So Friday is our family Sabbath because of the way we do our week and schedule. And someone needed help. And my phone was in another room, trying to keep it away from me. But I did come to my phone occasionally and saw it and saw that someone needed help with something. And the thought went through my mind. Two thoughts. I can trust God to run the world while I'm gone. And then, if your sheep falls into a well on the Sabbath, would you not go rescue it? And so I struggled with that. I had to think, is this, God, you can do this? Or is this a sheep falling into a well? And in that experience, I ended up responding to this person not as thoroughly as I maybe would have in another day, but I did respond with something, and I did say, here's this thing, let me help you with this, but also just recognize today is a day that I'm not going to be around my phone very much. I can't talk very much. So I'll give you this, and then I'll come back another day. Is that enough? Is that all right with you? So anyway, leave your phone somewhere else. And then your day of shopping, housework, fixing things, taking care of that big stack of mail, that should be a different day. And we need days like that. And that's why many of us get 2-day weekends. It's for this purpose. Maybe this means even that you don't do dishes on the Sabbath. Once again, don't be legalistic. That's something Kendra and I have tried. Some days we try to get all the dishes done and leave the dishwasher empty the day before, at the end of the day before the Sabbath, so that on the day of the Sabbath we can just put them right in. Some days we don't, and we do the dishes, and that's okay because of what's going on. But just to think about this day of, or this concept of moving you forward. Try to fight that so you can be present on the Sabbath. Okay, that's the end of talking about the Sabbath. We're going to now move in to talking about other rhythms, and I'm just going to plow ahead for this part so we can get to some other things at the end. Once again, if you need to stand up, or stretch or something like that, feel free to do that. I'll keep talking. This is the shortest section. This is going to be quick, and then we'll move on to some other things. But actually, I was going to read again from the old book. I just looked at my notes. Let's read again from the old book. It's actually not old. It's very new. It's just made to look old. I meant to have a little section in between each section, a moment of time with the Lord, thinking. We're going to do that right now. So I'm going to read a section. Listen to this. Let it soak in. We're practicing. We're doing some therapy on our hearts and our souls. And the concept I want you to think about is cease striving. Let God have control and surrender. This is, just to give you some background, this is a prayer written for leaving on a holiday, when you're about to leave and be on a holiday. But I just want to bring it in to this moment. Just this 2 minutes, leaving for these 2 minutes and ceasing to strive. This is a very short prayer, and then we're going to spend just a little bit of time once again sitting with the Lord and stopping. O Christ, our Sabbath, you have fashioned us to function best in rhyming lines of work and rest. Our relaxations and recreations, like unspoken invitations to that still greater holiday to come, when all burdens will at last be shed, and weariness be put to bed, and gladsome joy stretch endlessly before us. Bless now, O Lord, this happy foretaste of that good end. And let us cease and rest for a moment. Thank you, Lord. Let's take a breath in and exhale it as slow as you would like. Moving into rhythms. And feel free, once again, as I said, stand up, do whatever you need to. First rhythm, Sabbath. We just talked about that. But remember that the principles that we talked about, those same things, stopping, resting, being present, all those things, they apply just in different chunks of time to these other rhythms. Quiet times, sometimes called time with God, devotions, this daily rhythm of set aside time. You've probably heard, hopefully, heard some teaching, some urging towards this idea of spending time with God daily, quiet times. So this is not going to be exhaustive, and this is not going to start from scratch. I'm just going to share some thoughts regarding quiet times, kind of after, now that we're in this space, hearing some of the other things we've heard. The first thing that I want to say is to make space. You need set aside time, set aside place to align with God. You can't take this on the fly. It takes forethought, like what we've talked about. Any relationship, if it's going to grow, needs private space, time together without an agenda where you can get to know each other. This creates an environment where closeness can happen, where you can begin to understand each other's hearts. A quote from Paul Miller says, "You don't create intimacy, you make room for it." This is true whether you are talking about your spouse, your friend, or God. You need space to be together, which means you need to push other things out or cut other things out. Something else has to go away in order for the space to be created. Efficiency, multitasking, and busyness all kill intimacy. In short, you can't get to know God on the fly. Jesus himself, he gives us the example. He needed to be away from other people in order to connect with his heavenly Father well. So do you. He would often go off by himself. And think of his life. He had really important things he was doing. He was saving lives, healing people, raising people from the dead. And he had immense people pressures around him. When he went away, there would be a crowd and his disciples who would say, "Where have you been? Like, people are dying and we're looking for you. Where have you been?" And he said, he just set aside this important thing, basically saying, well, those things aren't for me to do. God has given me some things to do and some other things not to do. And I need to go connect with God. And then when they would come to him and say, "Where have you been? Now get to work with healing these people." He said, "Nope, we're actually going to leave these people. We're going to go to a new town." Jesus was so connected with the Father, moving with him and knowing what he was to do, what he was not to do. But Jesus needed space to connect with God. The other thing that we've talked about a lot is be authentic you. Come messy. Come with doubts. Come with your cares and worries. Let your Father know about them. Be gracious to yourself regarding your wandering thoughts and your poor execution. God is gracious with you. God knows who you are. Another thought that I'd like to bring home is in your time with God, as Kendra brought up, don't focus as much on learning or this other concept that we do a lot of being filled. We think when we have time with the Lord, a lot of times we want to learn or we want to be filled. But rather, think about realigning with God, who God is, and I'm just bringing myself up to this concept of that God is over everything. He's doing his work, and I just want to align my life with him. God is on the throne. God is in control. And God is the one who satisfies. And really these concepts of learning and being filled, they're both about me. But God has me. Can I trust him? I want rhythms in my life that realign me with him. And so one thing that I do with this, as I think about being with God or aligning with him, a helpful practice is that if I have a thought, as I'm reading my Bible or doing whatever devotion, I have a thought that comes up in a moment, I don't wait for the end to pray about that thing. The moment the thought comes up, I pause and I talk to God about it. Whether that's a worshipful thought or a thanksgiving, something I want to thank God for, or a request of something I want from him, it pops into my mind. And I want to practice being present. I don't want to hold off the communication to the end. So there's a back and forth dialogue. So I try to do this. When a thought comes up, I just commune with God right then in that moment about it. And then I continue. Another thought is to practice silence. As we have talked about, as we've done. Make these like mini Sabbaths sometimes when there's time with God. And really that's what it is this rhythm of practicing Sabbath on a small scale every day of trust and alignment with God. And then at the end of the week or beginning of the week, having a day for it. And then take baby steps. Once again, consistency is key. What do I do? What do I read? I'm not going to talk a lot about this. There's lots of resources out there. But the Bible, do that. Read the Bible. It's all good anywhere. And I can talk to you more about this if you have more questions. But the Psalms are great as far as if you think of your time with the Lord to be less about learning and more about connecting with God. The Psalms, it's all about that. Some of it is sad, happy, good, bad. It's all the Bible, so it's all good. But you run the gamut of human emotional experience through the Psalms. I've also seen a handout at the connection table, at least at the South Loop, that's just been at the connection table that says 10 Minutes with God. That's a great resource, just telling you how to do that, some guidelines of how to spend time with God. Another thing just an idea that I would advocate for is 2 shorter times with God a day. 5 or 6 minutes. If you're really busy and you think, this idea of even 15, 20 minutes with God doesn't work for me. If the purpose is to align with God, then what about 2 times at a shorter time throughout the day so that you just keep that alignment with God closer? I have So one practice that does this, that's been done throughout the centuries, is this thing called the prayer of examine. And you can look it up, Google it. There is specific prayer you could say or prayers, but really the idea is at the end of the day, you just say, with God, what did I do today? And I examine my day and then I give it to him. So have a time earlier in the day and then a prayer of examine at the end of the day. There is a resource, a devotional book that does this really well. It's called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality Day by Day. And I have one up here if you want to take a picture of it. But the writing is great. The devotions are great, but they're so short. And they're built around this idea of do this once at one time. And it doesn't say it has to be the first thing or the last thing. It says just any time, 2 times during the day, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, whatever, but just these 2 times during the day. I think it's a cool idea that's actually been very helpful for me. There's also one more resource I want to give you is this app called Pray As You Go. It's a devotional app that you listen to, and it's about 13 minutes long, and it's just so great. They do it so well about connecting with God. There's music, there is a passage of Scripture, and then a narrator guiding you through thoughts, connecting with God. And the people, the narrators, it's put out by Catholic Jesuit people in Britain. And so their accent, they have these British accents, and it's so soothing and wonderful. The aesthetic of the app is great. The music they do is not modern praise music. It's a lot of world music, ethnic music, or just music that the idea is to sit with God in His presence is very soothing. For myself, so I was introduced to it at a time when my heart had grown hard. And connecting with God was really hard. And the person who presented to me said, let this help with thawing your heart. And it was helpful in that I didn't have to do anything active. I just sat there and I plugged my earphones in and I listened to this thing. Because I didn't have the gusto in my life to put much effort in. And now I still do it a lot because I just love it. Sometimes I use it, I like to say, as a warm-up. So I do time with the Lord beginning in the morning, and I really struggle with getting up. I'm one of those people who it's as hard with me as anyone in the world. And Kendra knows this. And so coffee, the coffee pot has a timer. That should be another thing that I put up here. I decided it was a spiritual expense to buy a coffee pot that would have the coffee ready for me when I got up, because I don't have the strength to make coffee in the morning. And I need the caffeine. I'm addicted to it. Whatever. But so I get up. I'm a zombie. I walk to the coffee pot that's already made. I sit on the couch. I listen to Pray As You Go. And by the end of it, I'm warmed up. And I'm awake enough. And then I can maybe do something else for my quiet time. One thing about it, I said that it was a Catholic Jesuit app. As a Protestant evangelical church, just to speak into that a little bit, I listened to it for 3 years, and I've only experienced 2 times where something was shared that I didn't theologically agree with over the course of 3 years. The devotions are so about the gospel and about connecting with God. And really, that is a great ratio for any Christian teaching, no matter who you like. Don't expect everything you read that every influence of Christian teaching in your life, that it's going to be 100% exactly true, or what you did. God gave you a brain to listen to some things, and with other things to say, I'll give you grace. I don't think that's exactly right, but I'll still trust the other stuff you said. And so that's just my thing for that app. I'm just going to run through a bullet list really quick. Other things other than quiet times. Take vacations. Apply these same principles. Vacations are not worldly. It's actually more worldly to strive and not entrust yourself and the world to God. It is God's heart in the Bible. He talks about it so much, about holidays and feasts and seasons and taking time off. It's all in there. And he says throughout a lot of it, he says, I do this so that you would remember. I want you to, and that's what Christmas is about. And Advent, I want you to stop and remember. And then other seasons too. So vacations are good. Spiritual retreats. This space away. This thought again. Kendra talked about doing that, taking a couple of days away. Maybe this is a bad analogy, but where this is probably a terrible analogy, but where the rest of these practices that we've talked about are like doses of good nutrition or medicine for your spiritual life, retreats can be like an EpiPen that just pop you back into it. Maybe that's too much expectation, actually. Maybe retreats are more like going to a doctor visit, even if you're well. But you have to go to the doctor and spend that set-aside time apart from nutrition and medicine or whatever to just reconnect in a bigger way. So they're very, very good. People need EpiPens sometimes. People need doctor's visits sometimes. I left just enough time at the end of this workshop for Noah Chung to share her testimony. And actually, Noah is, of anybody I know personally at Park, does the retreat thing pretty well. And so, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'll take like... Oh, thanks, Tim and Hannah. Yeah. I'll take like just 3 minutes, and then I do want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. Right, Nate?
Yeah.
Okay. So, testimony for retreats mainly. And so, I don't know, how many of you have ever done like a solitude, silent retreat on your own? Like, for an extended, like a whole day. So not like just a couple hours, like a whole day or even like longer. A few of you have. Okay. So I'm not alone, but for me, retreats have been one of the most, so not like retreats with community, but by yourself and in solitude with no phone, have been one of the most helpful and like kind of like what Nate said, like EpiPen-y kind of things for me. Like just one story I want to share is that if you guys know, my title is, which official title is Near South Church Planting Associate Pastor. So it is one of my like primary goals to plant a church through Park in the next few years. And so I went one about like 6 months ago to a solitude retreat. I do one called Sacred Retreats, which is with these two older ladies who are just so wise and so loving and caring and so just thoughtful. And it's like an 8 to 4 retreat where mainly you do a couple things together as a group, but then the entire time you'll go out, and it's like a Catholic seminary campus up in Mundaline, which they have this huge lake, super peaceful. It's like guarded. There's like no other like streets or anything. And so I went there and I was like, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna know where God wants me to plant a church. That was my agenda. So I went there, and for the first like 2 hours, I'm like it's just like emptiness. I'm like, what is, like, I couldn't even like read the Bible. I was just really struggling just to even like get in the mode of like retreats. I tried reading, but it was just not connecting. And then, which another aspect of that retreat is they also have optional spiritual direction times, which I went to one of the ladies, and I was just talking through my experience so far, and she was like, why do you have to have an answer after this retreat, Noah? And I'm like, well, because I'm the Near South Church Planting Associate Pastor. I should have an answer by the end of this retreat. I'm paying money to come here. I'm a whole day here. And she was like, what if God is just wanting you to be? Just, the letter, like the word be. Like just being present. And I was like, that's a waste of time. Like, why would I want to just be present? And during that time, like, she just continued to realize that, like, Noah, being is more important than actually knowing what you're going to do in the future. Because if you don't know who you are and where you are with God, that plan is whatever you're gonna do, it's gonna fail. It's not gonna be successful. Whatever you're trying to be a father or a husband or a worker or whatever, it's not gonna work because you're not able to just be present. And so the next like 4 or 5 hours, I just spent time being. I didn't read anything. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't journal. I just walked around like a 3-mile lake for like an hour, and then I sat and just listened, and then I napped, and then by the time that was done, it was time to go home. So I didn't really accomplish anything, but I did realize that even though I'm not accomplishing anything, that God is accomplishing something, whether through me or whatever He has planned somewhere else for me to then enjoy. And so my testimony in that is that I would encourage everyone who's a part of the church to take these kinds of retreats. Because it's more important for us with such a distracted, busy, workaholic kind of culture. And I'm going to actually invite you. So I did take all your email addresses, and like for Nate, we'll send some resources out and things like that. But one thing is that I was going to take a retreat in March, but with my wife being due in April and some other things not working out, I'm going to do it in May. I got her permission, and so I'm gonna go on this retreat with the same like ladies that lead it. And it's it's funny because I'm always the youngest person there, I'm always like one of the few males that are there. It's mainly like 20 other women, mainly older. And they just see a very important rhythm of their lives for doing that. And so I want to invite you. It's I think like May 16th, Saturday, and it's an hour away. It's far, and it costs money too. And I think one thing about like even spiritual rhythms and rest, there's a cost to it. Like you can't do stuff or you can't spend things on certain things. It's like I think around $100 to do it because they lead it, they provide lunch, they provide the space. And so I would gladly love to have a few people come. I've asked a few people. I think I asked one person from Bridgeport Church a while ago. His name is Michael, and he's like a resident doctor, and he did it, and he was like, it was just nice not to have to do anything. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested in more, talk to me afterwards. But I think retreats are just so important to do. Even so much where even when you have kids, I think it's even more important to do. And I think also for retreats, being away somewhere where it's not distractful, but also where there's nature around you, it helps just a lot. Like even just simply like when I took my walk, halfway, a mile and a half in, it started pouring rain, and I had no umbrella. And I'm like, this is so inconvenient. But then as I was running, I was like, I could hear like simply like raindrops on the water, on the streets, on the grass, and on the leaves. And it's just so different that I just never really heard that before in a long time. And that's just kind of how also God speaks to us. And so just, I'm a strong advocate for retreats, like so much so that like if you like, that place that I go to, like there's scholarships and things too if you need that. But that's kind of like my testimony about it. But I'll leave it to Nate to just finish it up.
Stay up there.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
I'd like to invite Kendra to come up too. And then we're just going to field some questions. I know I was the one that talked a lot, but I am actually I don't have all the expertise on this. Both these people could answer your questions as well and have experience. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions about anything regarding any of this, theological or practical or whatever, personal even. Yeah.
What's it been like for you guys when rest is like more work? Where it's like, this is harder. Right? I'd rather just watch Netflix and do healthy food, lay on the couch, versus do some of this stuff.
That's a good question.
Say something about that.
I resonated with when Noah went on the retreat, like it taking a while to actually disengage, because when I did a 2-day retreat, kind of similar, but I was totally by myself in the woods, and I was really frustrated for the first bit because my mind was still going everywhere, and I really wanted to just like look at my phone, but I had like said I was going to leave it in the car. And it's almost like we have to detox for a little while because we're so overstimulated that it really does take like a little bit of work to say, I'm just gonna choose to do this, and it's gonna not be rewarding. Maybe it won't be rewarding the whole day, and you kind of have to accept that, but trusting the process a little bit, that at some point God will be using it. And for me, like having no expectations on the time is really helpful, because I kind of shared that, but or like going into it with a question, although sometimes that's important. Like sometimes we have something that we really do want God to show us during times of rest, but it's been nice for me to have a lot of space where I have no question, I have no thing I'm trying to discover or get, I'm just trying to be present with God. But it's hard. Yeah.
I would bring back also that idea that consistency is more important than execution. Or depth or length of time, how long you're able to do. So that's just that. I mean, as I was doing research and reading books along these topics and stuff, that just came up a lot. They said consistency is more important. Take baby steps. Elliot.
So there are
Yeah.
So I guess
Actually, Noah would probably know more about that and different faiths.
I mean,
or different denominations.
Yeah, I would not. They're just like, their big thing is that their Sabbath days are different than what traditional Protestant evangelicals practice. They have a certain like other nuances nuances that are not regarding about Sabbath, more so about like things you eat and things like that. So in a way, like yes, we do practice as Protestant evangelicals on Sundays because that's when the resurrection of Jesus Christ is, and that's kind of traditionally done. But as a kind of thing we're sharing, I mean, for them, that's just kind of what they've chosen. There are other theological things that maybe I don't think we can get into right now, but that would be more questionable. But primarily for Sabbath, as he was saying, just simply being a day, and when you do it, it's not that like I don't think it's that important. Like I think as a church we gather on Sunday because that's kind of how the work week works and kind of how we've done it throughout the past. But for Sabbath and true rest for yourself, I think that really is something that only you or your family can determine. So that hopefully that makes sense. I mean, even like Jews right now, they practice on Saturdays, Fridays, I'm not sure. And so
the event is increasing at the same time.
Yeah, I think like besides those, I think most do Sundays, but yeah, it's just more of a day selection. For them, there's like theological reasons why they do that, which we don't adhere to.
Travis.
For spouses and folks who have kids, you guys balance trying to have each other and the kids and quiet time personal.
I forgot that we're supposed to restate the questions for the recording. But so your question is regarding if you have a spouse or kids, how do you do this? How do you pull this off, basically? Well, I guess I would just say that one of the big things for me I've discovered on Sabbath is present time with my kids and with my spouse. And that's been part of a delight piece. And so that almost serves as like the undercurrent for the whole day. And then the planning and preparation part is really important. Kendra and I try to say, remember, we're not going to do these things. And this is going to be the day that we're going to do it. We're not going to do these things. And then also to say, and I would love to enable you to get some time away. So for these 2 hours or this section of time, you can feel free to go get some time away. And then at this other time, I will get that time away. Or even a lot of times what I do is I'll go to Kendra and I say, what is important to you on this Sabbath that you want? I'm not going to try to pretend to know the things that you want to prioritize on this Sabbath, so you tell me. And then I will try to enable and help you to have that happen.
When I took my sabbatical, I went to this orientation time that talked about like what a sabbatical can look like, which is a different subject if you're interested. But one of the things they said was to not think of it only as stopping, but also thinking of like doing different things that bring you delight than what you would normally do. And so for me, I'm home with our kids most of the week. And so being present with our kids is not the main thing for me because I feel like I'm doing that 6 days a week, you know. But for him it is. And so for me, sometimes it's like working on something. Like I just picked up learning the cello, so like playing the cello, I'm not good at it, but like doing something can be actually restful. So you have to know each other and honor each other's wishes and not say it has to look like this or something.
I guess like similarly, how do you balance like, you know, serving your church well and like as a weekend, you know, obligation or not, however you're gonna frame it, and then, you know, and like working with it's probably similarly to like your kids aren't gonna stop doing things on the Sabbath, right? So like you still have like serve them. So like not that service has to be a draining activity necessarily, but like how to I think like balance rest in that, but also like still be able to like
So the question was regarding church on the weekend, having service and how to balance serving your church basically and other things like that that are really important, ministry things. And this question was spoken by the leader of the Connections team at the South Loop. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't have like a perfect answer for that. But so I just say that that's something that I think about a lot too. And I really do have to predetermine in my head to set certain boundaries for things, but not be legalistic about it. Know that it's important to do those things. And also I'm just thinking back to the idea that, what did I say earlier? I had it in my head and I lost it. I forgot it. Sorry, Allison. Sorry, everybody else. My brain just went blank.
That's okay.
I've been talking for a while. You guys have something to say about that?
Yeah, I would. That's like a tough thing, especially. So I grew up in very much like a Korean immigrant church, and like you like work. The Sabbath was not really wrestling; it was really just more work. And so I would say that if you personally are going through where it's like burdensome and where it feels like work, and Sunday is your Sabbath day, I wouldn't say like don't do the ministry anymore, but I would say that scale back. And I know like at seasons, like, and it's hard because we're in the city, we're parked, and I don't know what Kenton and Rafe would say, but I would say like scale back. Because it's not worth you burning out, or anybody burning out. And also, we want to make sure that ministry could be part of your Sabbath by being life-giving. So some of the ministries I would say are life-giving. Some people love like setting up chairs, like that gives them joy, which is interesting in itself. Some people love worship. Some people love people. That's just not me, right? Like I would be burned out by like leading worship or actually I wouldn't mind setting chairs once in a while. And so actually not thinking about it. Not talking to people, huh? Yeah, not talking to people actually kind of was nice. So that's what I would say. Just kind of scale back. And yeah, take Sabbath, like not Sabbaths from that, but just take breaks from that, so that you can have joy in doing those things. And if it's not, then maybe something somewhere else is a better possibility. Some people love serving children. That should be something they should enjoy. Some people like it's just really not like it, and I just think they should step away from that. And so, as a church, I know that because there are so many needs every Sunday, that we don't talk a lot about taking breaks. But I know that it's hard because we always have a need. But at the end of the day, like things would get done. It will happen. It'll get done. It'll be fun. So
I just said that when we first started doing this, Sundays was the day we chose. We've changed that. But I didn't mentally think of it as starting until we actually got home from church, and that helped me, which, like, I'm not sure that I would, recommend that totally, but if you're not doing anything and the idea of taking a whole day is a little much, even just taking, the afternoon to when you get up on Monday could be, a place to start. And to say, as soon as we get home, no church, no work, no ministry, no grocery shopping. It's not in the Bible, but that's what we did. It's helpful.
And I just think in hearing this, I'm thinking about just some of the concepts that we've talked about how important this is and how it is to remember that even when it gets clunky and difficult and there's a cost and stuff like that, the concepts, you have to work through some of those things. Oh, another thing that I remember reading a lot is that it doesn't have to be a day, sun up to sundown. In fact, Jewish culture is the evening one day until the beginning of the evening the other day, or something like that. So it could include your sleep time and through the evening or something like that. That can be a helpful thought.
Should probably wrap up.
Yeah, so we need to wrap up. I do want to say one more thing for you, and I want to say this here for the video, but there are great resources. And there's no slide for them, but I want to show them and mention them, and they're the quotes that I gave. But some of these also, at least in the South Loop, you're going to recognize some of these books because they're books that we have made a part of our discipleship program. But one book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by a guy named Peter Scazzaro. And I'm going to put all these up here so you can come talk to me about them if you'd like. That devotional I talked about, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality Day by Day, is just a devotional companion that goes with that book, but you don't even have to have that. It's just a great devotional book. That's the 2 shorter quiet times throughout the day. It's really good. A book called A Praying Life by Paul Miller. He really goes in depth into this idea of God wanting us to be like children. And he just he explores that and talks about his own family, tells so many wonderful stories, and it just made me really embrace that concept of being God's son and coming to him like a child. A book, so I read a lot from quotes by Ruth Haley Barton, and they were from this book called Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership. And it's a book about this, but for the perspective of leaders. Church leaders, it's kind of written towards ministers, but actually leadership in anything is good. But she talks about this through that perspective. And then she has another book called Sacred Rhythms that is just entirely, it's not for leaders. And it's about this idea of rest, rhythms, the Sabbath. So that's another one. There's a book, the title is deceptive, and I think it's good. It's called Men of Courage, which written for men, and it makes you think, I think it wants to rope guys in because they're like, yes, strength, courage, going. And then the whole thing is about being authentic and honest with God. It's great. It's pretty much, I feel like the best. I just never found a book on how to be a man, a Christian man, like this book. And it's by a guy named Larry Crabb, who all his writings are all about this subject, and they're really great. And then the last one, this prayer book, it's called Every Moment Holy. And it is just a sweet treasure of prayers for different occasions. The idea is that there's this wonderful prayer for whatever situation you find yourself in that moment, and you can connect with God and talk to him about. There's a prayer before preparing a meal. And then there's a prayer before preparing an artisan meal. And then there's a prayer before preparing a hurried meal. There's a prayer for the keeping of bees, for the hipsters. There's a prayer there's a prayer for changing diapers. There's 2 prayers for changing diapers. There's prayers for different times of the day, for going on a vacation, like I said. This has just been like a dessert for me. I love reading this. In particular, the one about preparing meals, the concept is like not just about food. As I read it, I'm like, yes, this is how I feel about my work, or how I feel about this other little thing. So anyway, they'll be up here. Come take a picture of them if you want them, to know more about them or anything. And one more thing. If we had time, I was going to say, we're going to have 5 minutes, and I want you to not do anything else. I want you to pull out your phone or whatever, and I want you to plan and prepare for the implementation of one of these things. And if you're married but your spouse isn't here, I want you to text your spouse and say, I want us to have this thing in our calendar for this day. I was going to give us time for that, and I didn't do it. So what I would say, though, is instead of that, I would love it if everyone here, from this moment, planned and prepared a time that you're going to plan for this. So say, right now we're leaving the workshop, and maybe it's immediately after this workshop, or maybe it's tomorrow afternoon or Monday morning or whatever, and put it in your Google Calendar on your phone and say, at this moment, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think about what preparations I need to do or scheduling to implement something we talked about today. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, we, your children, have spent 2+ hours here together in a practice of something that we want to get to know you, or we want to be united with you. Lord, would you please use it in our lives? We submit this time to you that we've already given. God, we accept your love for us, and we ask for your help. In Jesus' name, amen.